Over half a year ago, I did a playthrough of Dark Souls with the Baldur Sidesword, which is widely considered to be one of, if not the best straight sword in the game. The other straight sword that fits that description, though, is the Silver Knight straight sword, and it's one of the few weapons in this game that I've never used. I recently got a comment on that Baldur Sidesword video stating that the commenter thought that the Silver Knight straight sword was better, and that gave me the idea to do a proper scripted video on it like this, and I'm curious to see how it'll perform compared to the Baldur Sidesword. That run was a while ago, and I had actually recorded it over a month before uploading that video, so it's been a while since I used it, but I do remember it being really fun to use and genuinely pretty powerful due to its speed and moveset, so we'll get to see how the Silver Knight straight sword differs. I'll fight as many bosses as possible with it, but to get it, we do need to exit the asylum and get to Anor Londo, and there's a bit of setup to do beforehand. First and foremost, I want to get to the Undead Parish, grabbing a couple souls along the way, including the souls dropped by the Black Knight. I also want to take out Havel, hence why I started as a thief for the crit modifier on the dagger. I think the bandit would do more damage per riposte, but I also wanted the black fire bombs for the asylum demon. Havel drops a nice 3,000 souls and his ring, which will be nice with the weight of the Silver Knight armor, but the fight does still take a while. The crystal lizard up by the Taurus demon gives us 2 twinkling titanite, of the 10 we'll need to max out the sword. The crystal lizard in the basin has a lot more health, and taking it out with the dagger is tedious, so I just throw a black fire bomb at it. I also want to get one of each of the 3 kinds of moss clumps, so I got my strength to 10 to get the physical damage out of the Astora straight sword and dexterity to 22 for the Silver Knight straight sword later. The sword does bounce off of the foliage because I don't have the faith requirement, but the damage is fine to just get some moss, and I got pretty lucky with how quickly the blooming purple moss dropped, since that usually takes a while. With the moss, we can head down the elevator and back to the asylum to do some trading. Fighting torch hollows with a bandit's knife is annoying, but not the worst if you can land a couple backstabs. Trading the 3 kinds of moss gets another 4 twinkling titanite, bringing us to 8 of the 10 that we need, and the rest can be bought from the giant blacksmith in Anor Londo, where we get the sword in the first place. The last bit of setup I want to do is get the Fap Ring from Lautrec, mostly to help with equip load. Running past the hollows and Channeler isn't too difficult, especially if you just quit out after getting past, and Lautrec only takes a parry and a little backstab chaining to deal with. With everything I wanted to grab before moving on, we can finally do Send Skip, which involves parrying a hollow in just the right spot to go out of bounds and hit a death cam trigger but not a death plane, before abusing the fact that objects don't load when in the death cam state to make it past Send's gate without ringing the bells. From there, running through Sends isn't much to write home about, though I did grab the gold serpent ring to help with the Silver Knight straight sword's small drop chance. Resting at the bonfire in Sens traps me in here until I'm able to get the Lord Vessel, but luckily that's not much of an issue since my weapon is over here anyway. Plus, I wanted to be human so I could summon Tarkus to help me with the Iron Golem. Obviously, being Tarkus, he trivialized the fight and let me move on to Anor Londo. I used to think Anor Londo was the hardest level when you were underleveled, and I'm not sure whether or not I agree with that anymore. At this point, I can get past the Gargoyles, Pain Guardians, Demons, and Archers without much issue pretty consistently. Lucky for me, that means all that's notable in this level is getting our gear. 10 humanity and the Gold Serpent Ring made the grind for the weapon not the worst thing ever. It wasn't great, don't get me wrong, running around the cathedral to kill the same enemy over and over wasn't my favorite thing, but it only took about 10 minutes to get the sword. I immediately ran over to the giant blacksmith and got it to +5 so I didn't have to riposte every night 3 times, and can now take them out in a single backstab. Grabbing the armor is pretty trivial at this point, despite it being guarded by 2 spear Silver Knights, and getting the shield only took about 5 more minutes, with no duplicate sword or spear drops, luckily. With all the souls from that grinding, I was able to get dexterity to 35, only 5 off of the soft cap, and we can take on Ornstein and Smough. It was very easy with the speed of the weapon, taking only 3 hits to stagger Ornstein in the first phase. 8 hits takes out Ornstein, as opposed to the 7 from the Baldur Sidesword, and Smough goes down just as easily. Now all we need to do is take out the rest of the bosses. Our first victim is the Gargoyles, and given that they're such an early game boss, it shouldn't be too surprising that the first was taken out in 3 hits and the second in only 2. I checked with Andre to see if the armor could be upgraded, and it can indeed, and I'm very tempted to do some grinding with the clams outside of Seath Arena later to get the armor and the shield upgraded, but I don't know if that'll be worth it. It will be funny though. Anyway, the sword makes short work of the Hydra in the basin, taking only 6 heads, which is pretty lucky considering the length of the weapon. Sif is a pretty easy boss to not take damage from, especially with a shield, and I didn't even end up using it for more than a hit or 2. A single hit does nearly 300 damage to the poor girl, making this fight incredibly short, and luckily short enough that we don't have to see her limp. Now, full disclosure, you'll actually see the Covenant of Artorias symbol below my stamina for the rest of the run, and you might have noticed that the textures for the rings are darker than normal. This is because I'm working on a mod, and while reinstalling the vanilla game, I forgot to replace the files that change those specific things back to vanilla. The passive effect will apply to the orange charred ring as well, but I'll make sure to wear the Covenant during the Four Kings fight since that's kinda part of the gimmick of the fight. Anyway, I went ahead and returned to the Asylum to take out the Stray Demon. Believe it or not, the Tortalos are much easier at this point in the game. The Stray Demon takes almost 300 damage a hit, just like Sif, making short work of the fight. I made sure to grab the doll for later and we can head down to Quelaag. I genuinely almost forgot that I hadn't fought Quelaag yet. Doing Sin Skip to actually beat Ornstein and Smough instead of just getting the large Titanite from inside the fortress is something I haven't done in a while, so that was throwing me off. The sword does plenty of damage to Quelaag, almost 500 damage a hit this time, which is plenty to shred her to pieces pretty quickly, especially when she decides to be so passive. Of course, I'm going to head down to Ceaseless Discharge to get the free 20,000 souls for another level in Endurance, and then we can head back up to New Londo. Sprinting through most of the level is just as easy as normal, and I got lucky with a couple ghosts you need to actually go past along the path. The easiest way to get onto the roof with Ingward involves running past the house, on top of the roof where the Rare Ring of Sacrifice is, then dropping back down in front of the house and running straight up the ladder. This distracts all the ghosts that would normally try to knock you off the ladder and has worked every time I've tried it. Minnow actually told me about this method a while ago, so thank you for that if you end up watching this for some reason. Anyway, that lets us drain the water and go straight down to the Four Kings. The first fight went remarkably well. I got down to the point where I was going to be able to beat the boss in only 3 kings, but the final king, just at the tail end of its life, used a grab attack right after I had exhausted half my stamina from attacking, then did it again and I just quit out. The second fight went much worse. The kings after the first started using magic much more, which was both frustrating and nearly detrimental to the fight. Both the second and third backed off in the middle of the fight and threw the tracking magic, which usually only happens while they're approaching, and both of them used the explosion AoE, but I did end up winning, still quite easily, with the speed of the weapon. With that, the Lord Vessel is placed and we can go deal with some optional bosses before I forget. First up, Gwyndolin. I did almost forget about Capra and the Gaping Dragon, but I do eventually go back for those, don't worry. I used the exploit where you jump at the statue in front of Gwyndolin's arena and quit out to make it disappear instead of getting the ring and attacking Guinevere. This works, if you're curious, because it sets your spawn location close enough to the statue that your hitbox is inside of it when you spawn in, and the spawning animation will automatically destroy any objects the player is touching to avoid getting stuck, including the statue. Gwyndolin goes down quite easily in only 2 cycles, the damage of the sword doesn't disappoint, and we can move on to Priscilla. Of course, I just sprinted through the painted world, landed on the wonky collision below the dragon, and ran straight to her. Eventually, I'll explore the painted world, but today is not that day. She goes down remarkably quickly, 2 strong attacks make her stagger, and then a few more take her down completely. On my way to the Duke's Archives, the Dark Moon Nidus attacked me, but her poise was high enough that I actually got hit a couple times since I didn't try to parry. A quick retreat and attack was enough to quell the situation. The Broken Pendant was easy enough to get, only behind a few normal enemies and 1 relatively weak special enemy, and the Rare Ring of Sacrifice makes the first Seath encounter a road bump more than an issue. The Manserpents die to a single riposte, and the Pasakas die to a running attack. Of course, I let one of the Pasakas grab me for fun and proceeded to backstab it just like normal. The rest of the Archives and Crystal Cave isn't exactly notable. Just run up the tower, twist 1 stair, drop down onto the other, twist it again, and you're there. Then run down the invisible paths that I already know by heart. Seath also isn't exactly notable. A clam got into the fight, but Seath took it out for me. It dropped a Twinkling Titanite though, which slightly cut down my preceding grind, down from 50 to 49 Twinkling Titanite. Crystals appeared kind of out of nowhere at one point, but other than that, it only took a few attacks to take Seath down. I then spent probably over half an hour killing clams over and over to get enough Twinkling Titanite to max out the armor and shield. This was not worth it at all, but it's funny, so I don't really care. Next up is the Demon Fire Sage, who has barely any more health than the Stray Demon and goes down just as easily, if a bit more jumpy. The Centipede Demon also wasn't an issue. You can stand in the corner to lure it to the starting platform, then easily chop the arm off from there and get the ring. And being super aggressive from that point is pretty encouraged by using such a fast weapon. This was one of the fastest Centipede Demon fights I've had in a long while. The Bed of Chaos isn't any different from normal, obviously. Run to the right, break the thing, quit out, run to the left, make the jump, break the thing, quit out, then hide behind the tree until it uses its scythes, run forward, dodge the 2 swipes through the fingers, drop onto the root, and pray it doesn't use Firestorm. I was easily able to beat it first try hitless. That said, one of these days I really should learn the Firebomb cheese. Nito is our final of the 4 lords, and to get to him we gotta go through the catacombs real quick. It's easy enough, but I imagine getting stabbed through the face by a skeleton would hurt pretty bad, despite what the damage numbers would tell you. Either way, the bone wheels aren't an issue after my bone wheel only run, and pinwheel is infamously considered easy for a reason. He did jump around a bit this time, but not enough to make the fight difficult, unfortunately. Normally the Tomb of the Giants is pretty easy for me since I know how to get through it so quickly, but this time I actually went for the Silver Serpent Ring for the extra levels in endurance and got lost for a bit. It's not much to look at, but suffice it to say, I died a few times. To make up for that, I was able to beat Nito first try pretty easily thanks to the poise and defense from the armor and damage from the sword. He also didn't ground stab too many times on the approach, and this ended up being a relatively easy Nito fight. It probably would have been easier if I had leveled up my health at all during this run, but where's the fun in that? Real quick, before doing the DLC, it's time for some quick cleanup. The Moonlight Butterfly is easy enough, just wait for a bit and take her down in 4 hits, which I have plenty of stamina for. Getting to the lower Burg was a bit of a hassle. I hadn't grabbed the key or anything earlier, so I had to run through the parish, under the bridge, and then go down to the Burg. While the sword itself wasn't anything special in this instance, the armor had enough poise to make this level, and consequently the Capra Demon, kind of a joke. The second dog was a little jumpy, but I took it down eventually, and the demon soon after. The depths takes about 2 seconds to go through if you know what you're doing. Jumping over the railing from the start, then dropping down through the hole and sliding down to the dragon is the fastest way through here by far. The dragon's health can be taken down to nearly half before it charges the first time, then easily taken out before it even stands up. Now it's finally time for the DLC. The Sanctuary Guardian, as I've mentioned before quite a bit, is my favorite Dark Souls boss by a decent margin, so it's unfortunate that the sword shreds it so quickly. This boss has a lot of safe openings, but you have to make sure to take initiative to actually take advantage of them before it jumps away or uses another attack. The sword is plenty fast for that too, since it's a straight sword. The next forest section can be sprinted through pretty easily despite the gardeners and guardians. Activating Kalameet, while tedious, is definitely worth it. He's my second favorite boss in the game, and in my top 5 Souls bosses more generally. He actually used to be my favorite, but I realized I liked other bosses slightly more over time, just because his openings aren't quite as fun to take advantage of as some others. Anyway, Artorias is probably my least favorite DLC boss, since it's just kind of rolling and swinging, no narrow openings to act on, at least ones that aren't extremely obvious, inconsequential switch-ups, and no cool gimmick. That said, he's still a pretty fun fight, and I think the straight sword moveset exemplifies that pretty well. It lets you be pretty aggressive and get a couple more attacks in than you would with some other weapons, while still feeling good to use because of the damage, unlike something like a dagger. He is still pretty easy though. There's not much that's actually exciting in Ulyssil, just make sure to grab the crest key from the Mimic in the second floor of the big building. The Mimic isn't even able to attack with the amount of damage the sword does. The 3 bloatheads and 2 sorcerers after are usually the hardest part of the DLC, but a bit of poise goes a long way. The Toon Prisoner is pretty easy to get past too. On the way down to fight Manus, the sorcerer that usually gives you backshots if you don't deal with it can be lured down so you can attack it from melee range by just standing at the bottom of the ledge that it's on. Manus himself is pretty easy if you know your attack opportunities. Finding them was probably my least favorite part of this game, but now that I know them, Manus is a pretty fun fight. It's kind of the epitome of what I would describe as Dark Souls turn-based combat. His attacks are pretty slow, but most of them leave him open to a counterattack or two, even more so with the speed of the straight sword and the amount of stamina I need to just wear the armor. Normally I'd leave Manus for after Kalameet, but I don't need 2 ceremonial final bosses. At least Kalameet has held a little bit more difficulty. Granted, that difficulty doesn't exactly show itself with this weapon and armor, but he is more difficult. Most of his attacks are effectively dealt with by dodging away from him, like the neck swipes, the tinnitus grab, the flying fire breath, whatever, though you can get more attack opportunities by recognizing when you can dodge in instead of out, like the standing fire or the dive attack, especially if you know you can bait him into slamming his tail. Normally that's used for a tail cut, but I like leaving it attached so I can exploit the tail slam for some extra damage next time he uses the dive again. The sword isn't especially useful against Kalameet, it's not a strike weapon, but the fight is still pretty quick despite that. Not the easiest Kalameet fight I've ever had, but certainly not the hardest. Now it's time for the actual ceremonial final boss. I decided to use the Hornet Ring instead of Havel's Ring since I probably won't be dodging much against Gwyn. Even with that, the riposte damage is kind of underwhelming compared to other weapons I've used, though it is slightly more than the Balder Sidesword. Honestly, when it comes to which of the two is better, I personally prefer the Sidesword by quite a bit, if only for the moveset, but the Silver Knight Straight Sword is still pretty good. The Sidesword gives you more damage for fewer levels, but is also a standard weapon and is harder to upgrade, so I would say it generally just comes down to preference. Even if I'd argue that the Leo Ring's energy pushes the Sidesword into the technically better category, if you know how to make use of it. It's been a long time since I've done a proper scripted video, especially for Dark Souls, and this was, I don't know, interesting to do. I had a lot more fun with it than I was expecting, especially after so long of not doing it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all. I especially want to thank Validit, Lilith the Hammer Witch, Nick Possum, Ratini, Krista, Howling Nocturne, Ryasune21, Rakuna, White Flame, Manarok, and Ryan Rickard. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I don't know how to end this.